Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Poetry Thursday, where some booktubers read you a poem on Thursday, usually with a mellifluous lilt in their voice, and then they do nothing else. They exit stage left, and that's it. I read you a poem and then go on and on. And sometimes I go on and on before I read it. And also, inevitably on this channel, Poetry Thursday has transformed into a soap opera-like melodrama with many, many episodes. It will be made into some playlist from hell down the line, maybe. Because we are going through one book that I intentionally chose because it is an era of poetry that I have always denigrated and hated. And that is 20th century American poetry, where the craft and the genre of poetry went to die as a popular genre, as something that a normal person would buy and read and understand. I have always known that there were towering figures that fit under the rubric of 20th century American poetry, so I found this big anthology and thought, okay, this seems like a serious undertaking, so we will just go through this on Poetry Thursdays and see what we make of it. And we have had to deal with all sorts of the vagaries that you get with big anthologies. There are a couple that you will get. One is the kind of pet writers of the editors. When you have multiple editors, this thing has 3 editors. When you have multiple editors, that's, even if you have one editor, that's always going to be true. That in exchange for the huge amount of work they're doing for the anthology, they will often throw in a figure who is indisputably minor, does not belong in the anthology, they'll do it anyway. Or historical curiosity. Sometimes a writer, like we saw earlier, will have invented a kind of verse form, or will have blazed a trail in some kind of literary fad or other. And the editors might not particularly like that figure, but they figure they need to be in there. They need to be in the book. Those are the main vagaries that we're dealing with for this book, because this book came out before the biggest such editorial propaganda demand of them all. Now, in the 21st century, those editorial vagaries have now set the table. They are the only thing. There's nothing else. And that is, of course, the progressive stack of identity politics. Now, anthologies like this are only made that way. And literary value is not thought of at all. Importance of inventing a genre is not thought of at all. It's just lift up your skirts, take down your pants, look at your dating history on Facebook, read, skim the Wikipedia page just to find out a few things. I need your melanin count. I need your sexual identification. I need your sexual partners. I need whether or not you are hated by 90% of the people who are going to read this book. If you're hated by them, you're in. If you're not, you're out. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how great you are. It doesn't matter how big your name is. This book was done before that was de rigueur. You couldn't do a book like this now without it being purely identity politics. So I don't have to worry about that. But there are still those earlier vagaries that you do have to worry about in an anthology like this. In any anthology like this, you go all the way back to Palgrave. You're going to get things like that. And today's poet is a weird mixture of those two. Even I am probably willing to admit that you couldn't leave this poet out. You'd probably be within your rights to just put in one poem. Probably you couldn't leave this poet out, but nevertheless, the main currents of American creativity in this genre that have stopped. Now, those currents don't run anymore. That book has dried up. But for almost a century, the main currents of American creativity when it comes to verse have flowed right by this figure. This figure's gone off into a thicket of roots and just stuck there. And that's never going to change. So, including a lot is probably not a good idea. The poet is Vachel Lindsay. And Vachel Lindsay is known for one poem. I mean, our editors give him a nice long introduction, but he's known for one poem, which is a kind of a shame because a lot of his poetry is really, really good stuff. Really fun, inventive, serious, challenging stuff. But he is mainly known for General William Booth Enters into Heaven. So that's what we're going to read today. I think these editors give us a couple of other poems. Factory Windows Are Always Broken, The Voyage. So they give us 3 poems. But we'll read just the one. General Booth was the founder of the Salvation Army. And when he died, he was a hugely revered figure when he died. And he had editorials and obituaries everywhere. And Vachel Lindsay decided to imagine his entry into heaven as some sort of big trumpets and tambourine parade. And he gives you that parade. He also gives you musical accompaniment. I can't do it justice here, but the verses, the stanzas of the poem, give us what instruments are playing. They give us a kind of musical accompaniment. But I'm just going to read the poem. It's a little bit on the long side, but it is worth your time to know. Once upon a time, everyone in the country. This poem, I don't know if this gives me the original publication date. It gives me a publication date of 1913. Once upon a time, everyone in the country knew this poem, or at least huge parts of it. And its signature refrain, its signature one line that is repeated endlessly in the poem, became a kind of cultural touchstone. People would use it even if they had no idea what it was from. All of that is gone now. But once upon a time, the editors are right. Once upon a time, this was a huge phenomenon. So let's read General William Booth Enters into Heaven. No idea what you'll make of it. Like, for instance, the parenthetical stage dressing right underneath the title says, to be sung to the tune of the blood of the lamb with indicated instrument. And the first stanza opens with bass drum beaten loudly. You can just imagine that. I think that's a rather interesting thing that this poem does, is to make you imagine a non-literary thing. To make you imagine another art form. Because you're not going to have a bass drum ready here, but I think that's really interesting in a way that this poem does that repeatedly. But I'm gonna ignore those after this point. Booth led boldly with his big bass drum. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? The saints smiled gravely, and they said, He's come. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Walking lepers followed, rank on rank, lurching bravos from the ditch dank, drabs from the alleyways and drug fiends pale, minds still passion-ridden, soul powers frail, vermin-eaten saints with moldy breath, unwashed legions with their ways of death. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Every slum has sent its half-score, the round world over, Booth had groaned for more. Every banner that the wide world flies bloomed with glory and transcendent dyes. Big-voiced lasses made their banjos bang, tranced, fanatical, they shrieked and sang, Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Hallelujah! It was queer to see bull-necked convicts with their land make free, loons with trumpets blow to blare, 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 on upward through the golden air. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? You'll note the author's intent here, not that the artistry of what's going on here with that repeated line is brought to bear in this stanza, the one I just read, because Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb is not in parentheses here, and it is everywhere else. And believe it or not, that kind of orthographic care makes a difference. Anyway, let's just move on. Booth died blind, and still by faith he trod, eyes still dazzled by the ways of God. Booth led boldly, and he looked the chief, eagle countenance in sharp relief, beard a-flying, air of high command, unabated in that holy land. Jesus came from out the courthouse door, stretched his hand above the passing poor. Booth saw not, but led his queer ones there, round and round the mighty courthouse square. Then, in an instant, all that blear review marched on spotless, clad in raiment new. The lame were straightened, withered limbs uncurled, and blind eyes opened on a new, sweet world. Drabs and vixens in a flash made whole. Gone was the weasel head, the snout, the jowl. Sages and sibyls now, and athletes clean, rulers of empires and of forests green. Little bit of a stumble there. Whole and jowl have never rhymed in the course of English literature. They certainly didn't rhyme when he wrote this thing. Little bit of a stumble in an otherwise metrically perfect, sound perfect poem. The hosts are sandaled, and their wings were fire. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? But their noise played havoc with the angel choir. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Oh, shout salvation, it was good to see kings and princes by the Lamb set free. The banjos rattled and the tambourines jing, jing, jingled in the hands of queens. And when Booth halted by the curb for prayer, he saw his master through the flag-filled air. Christ came gently with a robe and crown for Booth the soldier, while the throng knelt down. He saw King Jesus. They were face to face, and he knelt a-weeping in that holy place. Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb? Are You Washed in the Blood of the Lamb had a very notable significance for the Salvation Army, and was often the call that they would give to passersby from their drums and kettles on the sidewalk, which is why the word salvation in that upper stanza is capitalized. And at some point in the poem, you could analyze this thing forever. It's brilliant. When I say that Vachel Lindsay was basically a one-hit wonder, I'm not meaning to denigrate this poem at all. I think it's a shame. A lot of his other poems are every bit as inventive and thought-provoking as this one. But this is the only thing he's ever going to be known for. And therefore, he should not be in this anthology. The current went on, and he got stuck in a root right here. It affected no one, did nothing, except that the whole country knew this poem at one point. Maybe, I don't know these editors, maybe that was rationale enough for them. Could very well be. But at some point in this poem, Booth gets his sight. We're told when he first enters heaven that he can't see Jesus. And at the end, we're told that he does. So something is happening there, and I bet if you were to analyze this to a fairly well, you would see that it has something to do with whether or not that famous refrain is in parentheses spoken to you, or part of the poem, so to speak, spoken to others or by others. Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Wonderful little detour in our psychohistory of 20th century American poetry. Wasn't expecting to find Vachel Lindsay in here. I really wasn't, and I'm glad that he's in there. An odd, weird figure, never had a biography, same thing down the line. He's never had a modern biography, same thing as so many poets that we've encountered on Poetry Thursday and that we will encounter. But if memory serves, on the table of contents, the next poet doesn't have to worry about that. The next poet is famous. With an anthology like this, especially before so-called identitarian politics, you know that you will get the famous people. You know that they will occur. In a modern anthology, they won't. And if you ask, where are they, you will be called by your tenured professor a racist. You flunked out of the class, you'll be dismissed from the room. The professor will do her best to get you out of the college. And everyone will attack you on social media. If you even ask the question, okay, there's this massive figure. He happens to be a straight white man, but where is he? In an anthology called 20th Century American Poetry. He won't be there, and you are forbidden to ask where he will be. So we don't have to worry about that yet. So the next figure coming up, I think, or maybe one more, is major. So I'll probably subject you to more than one poem. But when it comes to Vachel Lindsay, there's only one poem to read. So I hope you liked it. We'll see what you make of it. I'll wrap this up for now. I will see you next week. Thank you, BookTube.